The liturgy and the faith in England, is it dead? Is it dying? Dr. Joseph Shaw with the Latin Mass Society of England and Wales is on with us to talk about that issue. Plus, did Pope Francis really ban the Latin Mass? This and much more coming soon.
Can we start with what is the status of the Catholic faith in England? England having a very interesting history for the reasons I stated earlier, having had gone through a persecution, had to fight even to the shedding of its own blood, Edmund Campion being an excellent example of that, to fight for the faith. What is the status of Christianity in England today?
Well, we survived. We survived somehow through that period, and partly thanks to our own resources and partly thanks to priests coming from Italy and Catholics also migrating from Ireland to England in the 19th century. We now comprise about, 5% of the population, not very much. And of course, we're suffering all the problems that are suffered around the world of lapsation and failure of catechesis and all those sorts of issues.
Now, I've heard that England is considered one of the most agnostic countries on the planet. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
No, I wouldn't actually. I think that there are countries such as, I think the Czech Republic is the worst.
Well, I heard it was Tokyo or Japan rather, but okay, the poor Czech.
Yeah, well, there's that as well. I think it's true that religion has sunk to a pretty low level here, but it's nothing like as bad as in the Scandinavia, for example.
Wow.
It's really terrible there. But what we have here is a lot of people with a very vague, non-Catholic Christian kind of culture. Mm. So people who you call them Episcopalians, Anglicans. So they have a kind of vague idea that there's a God, and there's a kind of vague idea that they can always go to church if they wanted to, and they might go there to get married. Mm. So there's quite a lot of that, but it's even that is fading away now, because that is now 2 generations, not just 1 generation, but 2 generations away from serious practice of faith.
Let's talk specifically about the Catholic community then. I remember having there's a priest friend of mine who was in England at the time Benedict XVI made of his visit there. Mm-hmm. And he's an American who was in England at the time. And even from his perspective, it seemed to me that was a fairly monumental moment in the life of Catholics in England. What would you say about that?
Yes, it was very significant. It was one of a number of things actually which surprised our cultural and political elite by how much enthusiasm it generated. But this keeps happening. There are events which, oh gosh, I had no idea that Christianity was still something which interested people. It happens over and over again. So cultural events which involve Christianity, people pick up their ears and they listen to it. A couple of years ago, there was an exhibition in the Victoria and Albert Museum called Opus Anglicanum, and they said they were amazed by the fact that people were interested in coming to look at English, mostly religious needlework. Well, why would anybody be interested in this boring old stuff? Well, actually, it was fascinating. It's part of our heritage and culture, and people wanted to see it. And people are no longer motivated by the kind of serious Protestantism that was kind of anti-Catholic. Mm. That's disappeared, and that's a good thing. And that was stopping people welcoming the Pope. That was stopping people taking the medieval heritage seriously. All those things, that's really gone now. There are a handful of people like that in Northern Ireland, but it's finished. So you have something like that. You have a very, very attractive figure of Pope Benedict. I think that's an important thing to note, that he was personally a very, very attractive guy. He spoke very well. He was very gentle, and obviously, had our was concerned with us, and he came here and people listened to him. Mm. And people really lined the streets and turned up to events and stuff, and there was very little anti-Catholic stuff in the media, very little.
So when we think of the Anglican Church in America, we kind of think of like high church Anglicans, high church Episcopalians. Yeah. Is this the kind of like liturgy that's present in the Catholic Church in England? Is it like all very high church, very beautiful? What is the liturgical practice in England?
It's very mixed. So you do have that in some churches, and then you have evangelicals who are within the Anglican Church, and there's quite a lot of those. And then you have a whole lot of people who are called kind of middle-of-the-road liberal Anglicans, who don't appear to believe anything and don't appear to have any kind of liturgical sense, and they're just kind of going through the motions, really. But, of course, the Anglican Church has got these enormous assets. It's got all these buildings, it's got income, it's got investments, a vast amount of money there, and not as much as they would like, of course, but there's quite a lot there. So it's a machine that can just keep on going, even if there's no one turning up to any of their church services.
Sounds like
so there's a huge number of Anglican clergy, and vastly more than Catholics, even though they got fewer people coming to church.
That's insane. But going back to Benedict's visit again,
yes.
It was described to me that this set into motion a revival of the Catholic faith in England. Is that the case? What is so I've heard that it even has set into motion a sort of a love of tradition in the traditions of the Catholic faith there. So you being the chairman of the Latin Mass Society, I'm wondering how have you seen the growth of the Latin Mass community as a result to, say, the Benedicts visit, or even as we transition into the effects of Traditionis Custodes?
Yes, well, I mean, there's something in that. I mean, you can see, in fact, there's a statistical effect on the number of ordinations. So you can see, Pope Benedict becomes Pope and he visits England, and then there's an uptick. And Pope Benedict really brought out a situation, not only in this country, where he particularly affected us because of his visit, but in many countries around Europe, and I think in America as well, where his whole style stimulated an interest in everything to do with, the traditional liturgy, chant. I mean, I run a Gregorian chant group in Oxford, and there were lots of students coming in saying, "Oh, I'm interested in chant," many, many more than before. But unfortunately, the effect has not lasted. Pope Benedict left office, and that whole kind of project and appeal has not been maintained.
Wow.
So, even the English bishops, we might be critical of the English bishops, but they did take up a bit Pope Benedict's program. So, for example, they reintroduced the Friday abstinence in this country. Oh, wow. Which is, quite something, having abolished it in the 1980s. Wow. And they reintroduced it. People were interested in that. It was something which showed you a Catholic. It was something which you could do for God without being thought to be a kind of Pharisee. It brought us all together a bit. And that's still there. But the overall program that the way to evangelize the country is through beauty and solemnity and devotion and stuff. Well, and theological seriousness. That's been on the back burner since Pope Francis.
Now, with the Traditionis Custodes come out, it's raised a lot of conversation, debate amongst Catholics worldwide. What I found fascinating was, apparently in England, you guys have enjoyed having the traditional form of the Mass going back to Paul VI because of Agatha Christie. Is that rumor true?
Yes. So, the Latin Mass Society was one of the founder, members of the International Federation of Univoce groups. So it was one of the oldest Univoce groups, 1965. So we saw there was a huge problem happening, and we got organized. And when the new Mass came out in 1969, my predecessors, they said, let's see if we can get cultural figures to sign a petition asking for the old Mass to be preserved, because it's a cultural artifact of great significance, not just for Catholics, but for human culture in general. I think it was a very clever idea, because everyone was saying, or the church officially was saying, oh, this is going to be wonderful pastorally. So you couldn't really make the claim that we need it for pastoral reasons. So they said, well, okay, forget that for a moment. we need it for cultural reasons. It's a culturally important thing. So they got Agatha Christie, they got the editor of the Times, they got the controller of BBC Radio 3, which is on a cultural radio program. They got 2 Anglican bishops. They got a member of parliament from each of the main parties. They had a whole lot of musicians, poets, writers, and one of them was Agatha Christie, which is always a kind of memorable one. And they got Cardinal Heenan, our cardinal at the time, Cardinal John Heenan, was very friendly. Didn't do a great deal for us practically, but he did do this, which is he took this petition and gave it personally to Paul VI, with whom he had a good relationship. And Paul VI, the legend is Paul VI looked down the names of Agatha Christie, but it was arranged
whatever it takes.
Order. She's near the top, just after Vladimir Ashkenazi, who is the only surviving petitioner.
That's hilarious.
Still alive today.
We only have about a minute and a half left in our conversation with you, Dr. Joseph Shaw. Your thoughts on Traditionis Custodes?
Well, I have 2 thoughts. One is it's a very, very sad, because the Pope is characterizing us in the accompanying letter in a very unflattering way, which I think is very unjust. The other thing is that I think it's important to recognize that it's the actual legal stuff in it is not quite as bad as it might appear. What it's doing is it's giving power to bishops. If the bishop is friendly, then actually he can let everything carry on as he wants.
Amen.
If the bishop's unfriendly, then he's probably already made it very difficult to have the traditional mass. So I think that, we can survive this. Yeah. And I do encourage people not to panic.
I would agree. It's I think it'll be fine in the long run. It may be difficult for some, there's no doubt, but I noticed you have a great blog post here over on the Latin Mass Society of England and Wales. It's lms.org.uk. You should check it out. Some great information there. I encourage everybody to check it out. Dr. Joseph Shaw, thank you for your time today. We're very grateful to you.
Thank you.
If you like that interview, then be sure to check out some of our other interviews that you might find fascinating. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this interview with someone that you think will find this informative and inspiring. God love you.